In this tutorial, we're going to build, texture, and light a simple room in Tomb Editor, the Tomb Raider level editing software. This tutorial is going to be done using the Tomb Raider 10 engine. So I've already started a new level. When you do that, you're presented with this rather large room that we're looking at here. This on screen right here is the room that you always start with when you start a new level. You can change the size of this, the number of faces in the preferences, but this is the default for when you first install the software. So this room is much larger than the room that I want to create for this tutorial. So up here in the 2D representation of the room, which is what the sector options is displaying on the left hand side of the screen, I'm going to select a 7x7 block instead of this really large block. So I'm going to do 7 across and then 7 down. Now what I want to do is use my crop tool right here, and that will crop that large room down to just by a 7x7 sector area. So with that, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, get this positioned in the center of the screen. Now that we have that built, the first thing I want to do is divide these walls into smaller sectors like you're seeing on the floor, these smaller faces. That's going to be critical later on when we want to texture this room. So I'm going to select this set of walls right there. Then under the transform menu, I'm going to do grid walls into 3. And that's going to grid that large rectangle you see over here on the north wall into 3 perfect squares. So I'm going to do that to all 4 walls. Like I said, this is just going to come in handy later on when we want to texture this room. Okay, now that we have all 4 walls broken down into the square faces instead of the rectangles, I'm going to now put some pillars on each side of the room, the left and right side of the room, to give it some variety. We don't want just a square, that would be pretty boring. So I'm going to come in here and select this individual face right there. That red face is reflected over here in the 2D map with the face with the outline red. So I want to make that a pillar. I'm going to choose to set wall. And you can see what that did was, it basically takes that face away. When you look down at it, it's no longer blue, it's gray. So there's essentially a hole there that then gets 4 walls placed around it. It's a floor to ceiling pillar, essentially. So I'm going to do that to create 3 evenly spaced pillars on each side. So now you can see we have a square room with 6 pillars in it, 3 on each side of the room. Now remember when we broke the walls down into these square faces? I want to do the same thing to these pillars, again, so they texture properly in the next step of this tutorial. So I'm going to select each one of these, and you could again go under grid walls in 3, but you can see Control 3 is the keyboard command for that. So I'm just going to use that on the rest of these faces. So now those are all broken down into square faces. Let's place Laura in here. If you select on one of these faces on the floor, and then right click the mouse, you can choose to move Laura to that location. So that's what I'm going to do. You can see now she is placed there in the room. Let's take a quick look at this and see what the size relationships are to her and the rest of the room. I'm going to press F5. That will play test the level. So there she is. You can control her just like normal now. Gonna run around the room a little bit. You can see the ceiling, walls, floor, pillars are all there. The room is a little high for what I want to do. I want to reduce this room essentially by one of those full square faces, so there'll only be 2 squares vertically per wall instead of 3. So let's do that. If you press P, it'll go to the pause menu. And you can exit the title, then exit game. So I'm going to select all of the floor polygons we have here, all of the faces on the floor, and that'll of course select the pillars as well. And then if you press S on the keyboard, that's going to start to lower the walls. Each one of these full square faces will take 4 presses of the letter S to lower that one full square. So that took me 4 times to lower it down to where there's just 2 of these square faces vertically per wall. I want to texture this. Right now we only have this white texture. That is what is installed when you install Tomb Editor. So we want to install our own texture set. I'll put a link to the description below to the texture set that I'm using. So after you download that and extract it all, what you can do is go to this plus button right here in the texturing palette. So I'm going to press that. Then I'm going to navigate to where my texture set is. What you've downloaded should be called the 2008 Back to Basics Peru set. So in there, you're going to want to go into the TGA folder. And you have 2 texture sets, one that are 64 by 64 pixels and ones that are 128 by 128. I'm going to use the 128 by 128. So when you open that up, we now have this full texture set over here in our texturing window. There's lots of textures there to pick from. I'm going to pick a few for this tutorial. Of course, if you want to pick something different, feel free. It's your room, your level that you're building. But first I'm going to texture the floor. So the floor texture I want to use is right here. It's kind of like these old style bricks. I'm going to select that, and then under the texture menu you can say texture floor. Doesn't look like anything changed in this window because we're in the 3D view. Up here at the top of the screen you can choose a 2D view, 3D view. What we want to choose now is the textured view. Now you can see the floor is covered with that brick texture, and the walls and pillars are still covered, of course, and the ceiling with that default white texture. So for the ceiling, I want to choose these wood planks that are right next to that brick floor. So I'm going to click on that once to choose it, and then under textures, say texture ceiling. Now you can see the ceiling got textured. I'm going to choose a different brick texture for the walls. I'm going to choose that one right there. Again, you can choose anything you want. Under textures, now I'm going to texture walls. Now you'll see the pillars are essentially considered walls because they are. So they have textured with the same stone texture that the walls were. I want to change that. I want the pillars to stand out and look like something different. So let's find a new texture for those. I'm going to use this orange and gray texture right here for the pillars. Now we're going to have to texture these manually. There's no texture pillars because that's not a built-in thing. You can only texture floors, walls, and ceilings automatically like that. So what we want to do in the texture menu, we have a bunch of different tools we could use here. Probably the default brush is already selected for you. If not, choose the brush. And then with this texture selected, when I click on the pillar, it's going to paint that texture right on there. I want to rotate that texture though. I don't want it to go sideways. I want it to go vertically instead of horizontally. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click that texture, and it rotated at 90 degrees. Now I'm going to copy that. I'm going to press the Alt button and click that texture one more time. Now when I paint with that, it's going to paint it so it goes horizontally instead of vertically all the time. So you don't have to rotate this each time. So I'm going to go through the walls, all the different walls of the pillars, and paint those with this new texture. All right, so let's check out that new texturing in the game. I'm going to press F5 to play test it. That's looking pretty good. It's no longer just a plain white room. The height is a little bit better. It's not gigantic. And our pillars look pretty good. Still pretty repetitive, right? With the 6 pillars all exactly the same on both sides. So let's kind of break one of those. Let's add some variety to these pillars and change it so it looks broken. I'm going to go back to the 3D view. And I think I'm going to choose this pillar right here, this red one that I just selected. Now I know earlier we set the wall so it became this pillar and essentially removed that floor polygon right there. I'm going to turn it back by clicking this button right here, Set Floor. I'm essentially going to turn it back into a regular floor and ceiling polygon. So I click that. It doesn't look any different here in the editor, but over here you can see it's not a green square like the other pillars anymore. It's just a regular blue square like the rest of the floor and ceiling. So let me reselect that. Now we can edit this pillar because it's not the set wall any longer. It's just normal floor and ceiling polygons. So by pressing A, I can lower the bottom half of this pillar down and lower it to the floor if I wanted to, or even below the floor each time I press A. To raise it back up, you can press Q. I'm going to leave it 2 clicks above the floor. And then the ceiling I want to raise towards the ceiling polygon for the pillar. So the W key will raise that and the S key will lower it. So I'm going to press W, I think once. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit by rolling my mouse button or my mouse wheel. Now when I click this polygon right there, the whole thing turns red. If I click it a second time, we start to get these white arrows that are pointing at the edges of the polygon. As I rotate it, you'll see it rotates 90 degrees. I'm looking at the one on top of the polygon. You can see other things are happening on the sides right now, which is fine. Also, if you press Control, I'm holding the Control key down. Then when I press, it points at the corners instead of the edges. So with it pointing at this corner closest to me, closest to the camera, I'm going to press A. And you'll see it lowered just the half corner of that polygon. That's just to help it look broken instead of being perfectly flat on the roof and on the floor. I want to do something similar to the ceiling. I want to rotate the ceiling arrow to a different corner. Let's try that one. And then raise that up a little bit. That should be fine. Now we want to check the texturing on this. It probably got messed up because we've changed the size of the polygons. And also the inside or these faces of the pillar don't show any texture, they just show the white. So let's fix that up. I'm going to press Escape on my keyboard and that will deselect this polygon. You can see the texture on these sides where I've bent the corner down. The texture looks bent and squished. So I'm going to reselect that texture. I'm going to press Alt-A. That'll take me to the correct texture. Now remember, I lowered these polygons down 2 clicks, so that's half of a texture, since a full world square or unit is 4 clicks high. So I only want to really select half of this texture in this case. And then I'm going to retexture this. Now that I've reduced the size of this texture down, this selected area is the portion of the texture that I will be using to paint this shape. You'll see it looks much better. It's not squished or twisted. I'm going to go around to that side, work this around, go there. The ceiling polygons I only raised by 1 click, so we need a little bit more of this texture over here so it doesn't look stretched. There we go. Those all look pretty good. And now I want to paint the insides with just a little bit of this same orange, which is right here. So that looks pretty good. Now that we've broken this, let's put something there. I'm going to put a med kit there for Laura to pick up. So over here in your items menu where Laura is, also known as the WAD file for this level, you can search the WAD file that's loaded, and this WAD file is loaded automatically by the editor unless you tell it to load something else using this plus button right here, which you can do. But the default WAD file has a med pack in it. So I'm going to just type in med in the search field. I'm not going to use a large one. There's also a small one here. So with med still in the search field, I'm going to hit enter again, and it'll just go to the next one, which is what I want. I just want to put the small one there. So with that selected here in the window, I'm going to press the Add Item button. I want to switch back to the 3D view. I don't want to accidentally texture something in this view, which is easy to do when you have texture selected and you're going to add stuff to the room. I'm going to go back to the 3D view so that doesn't happen. I'm going to click on that polygon. It puts items on polygons by default in the center of the polygon. So you can adjust the placement of those by pulling these arrows around. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. That'll let me have a more fine adjustment to the placement on this pillar. And you can also rotate that. There we go. So you can see now there is a med pack sitting there on the pillar. Let's play test this again and make sure Laura can get on there and pick it up. So there's our broken pillar. It helps the room not be completely repetitive. Some of the textures certainly look repetitive. We can go in there and fix those by rotating them and flipping them and doing some different work to them so they don't look so repetitive. But I want to climb up on here, see if she'll grab that med pack, which she did. We can climb off. So the room is coming together pretty good. I want to add some lighting to this, and then that'll about wrap it up for this tutorial. So let's back up here a little bit. I'm going to rotate the room back to its starting position, which you can do that by pressing F6 on the keyboard. That rotates it back to just like when you opened the editor for the first time. So to this, maybe about right here, I want to add a light. Down here is the lighting panel, lighting palette. So I want to add a sunlight, a sun. which is that option right there. You can have different kinds of lights we can add. So when I choose the sun, I'm going to use the plus key, press right there. Now you can see it added a sun. It looks a lot like when we added the med kit. It's got the arrows in the rotation. So I want to lift this up off the floor. You can press the green arrow and drag up. I want to switch this over so we can get a preview of the lighting. If I go to the texture preview, and then also in addition do the lighting mode, we'll get a representation of how the room will look with textures and lighting in it. So let's make some adjustments to this sun. I'm going to click it again to make it active. I'm going to change the intensity a little bit. I'm going to bring it up to an intensity of 1. You can see right away that brightened up the room some. I also want to rotate. I'm going to rotate so it points down a little bit. You can see as I point down, the floor becomes more lit. As I point more upwards, the floor becomes darker. And if we were looking, we would see the ceiling was getting more lit now. I want it to point down just a little bit. So maybe something like that. And then I want it to point a little bit to the west or the left. So I'm going to rotate like that. And you can see as I do that, the lighting in the room changes. So you can get a preview here of what you are going to accomplish with the lighting. So something like that. And then I want to change the color of it. I'm going to click on the color option. I'm going to try a light blue. I like that one better. You can see we're getting a preview here. So I'm going to go with this color blue. I'm going to OK that. Now let's play test this again. That lighting looks pretty good. It really enhances the room a lot to have that lighting in. We have some shadows being cast from the pillars. Certainly there's highlights on the wall and on Laura herself. And it looks a lot more alive with that lighting. So that's the end of this tutorial. That is a quick build of a pretty small, pretty basic room in Tomb Editor.